Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Octopus Electric Vehicles watch along of the first Extreme E event of the year. There are 4 more, so hopefully we'll get you all excited about this brand new, amazing motorsport. Along with me today, I have 2 amazing women from the world of electric vehicles and of racing. First up, we have Heather Kennedy from the EV Group Nexus, who can say hello in a couple of seconds. And also, we have Emily Glanvill of Emily Glanvill Racing. Hello, Emily. Hello, Heather. You want to say hello? See what's going on?
Hi, good morning.
Amazing, amazing. So between the 3 of us, what we hope to cover off is everything about Extreme E, everything about the inclusivity of the event as well, and also hopefully open your eyes to the world of electric motorsport, because I think up until now, motorsport and electric vehicles and a pursuit for looking after climate change don't really go hand in hand. Even if we're looking at something like Formula E, which has an amazing impact on changing people's minds about electric cars, but does it really point out how we need to do things to make the world a better place? I don't know if it does. And I think Extreme E has hit the nail on the head in achieving that. Before we get started, suppose it would be cool to introduce Heather. Heather, what do you do and where do you come from?
Hiya, so I'm from the west coast of Scotland. So I'm part of the EV Group Nexus, which is an association of independent electric vehicle clubs. So we cover the UK and Ireland as well. My club is the Scottish EV Drivers Club, and I set that up in 2015. And that was just to try and increase community engagement and bring like-minded people together as well. So we've got 1,300 members, which have increased over the years. So you can find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Amazing, amazing. And Emily, do you want to introduce yourself? I know we're going to go into that a little bit deeper, but do you want to introduce yourself and what you do, maybe what you're studying and what you do as a we'll put hobby in inverted commas, right?
Sure. My name's Emily. I'm talking to you today from Edinburgh. I'm a Scottish racing driver. I've been racing since I was about 15, 16. Love everything motorsport related and sustainability related too. So really excited to see the Extreme E today and how we can combine these 2 worlds and hopefully see a more sustainable future for motorsport. As Charlie said, outside of motorsport, I'm also in the final year of my university degree studying product design engineering, specifically for sports industries. I definitely have a vested interest in motorsport from a design and engineering point of view as well.
Amazing, amazing. I think it's really important to point out just the work that sort of makes people think about electric vehicles. I think the EV Group's Nexus does that in a really important way. I think just like Extreme E, you can sort of sit, and Emily, I think the same for you on the outside of motorsport, you can sit and not really know how to get involved, and it can feel very much like people close the doors behind them and make it really like this exclusive club that, you know what, I'm a racing driver, you're not going to get to join. And actually sometimes that can be the EV world as well, not on purpose, but like completely by accident, that people sort of join and get so excited about cars really quickly that they forget that actually bringing it back to basics and making it really simple and having a car to go and see is really important. Because I think that's where I first met Neil a wee while ago, and the EV Group's Nexus was fantastic in sort of just having a place where I think you go and get, I think it was vegan cookies and have a chat around the car park while speaking about sort of electric vehicles. It was like going to the McDonald's car park back sort of 10 years ago, except rather than putting trays underneath the rear wheels and yanking the handbrake, you had people talking about how to fight climate change and how to make their houses more sustainable. It was it's a really sort of weird way that the sort of the world, our culture is changing, and I think that's something that the electric associations of Scotland and of England, and also then the groups themselves. I think there's a very interesting point to be made there, is that there's differences between the associations which sort of lobby and do stuff and really help sort of push forward the political agenda. But Heather, people like yourself bring people together and really help them enjoy the cars, right? Which is really,
Yeah.
really cool. Amazing, amazing. So the way today's going to work is hopefully you've prepared some of our Arabic coffee. If not, don't worry about it. I'm not going to have any while we're chatting, but you can absolutely give that a try. I tried it when I was out in the Middle East with some electric vehicles. And then also tonight you can have the bash, which looks really cool. I sort of semi-invented that recipe off the back of 2 recipes that I've had sort of combined, but because I think it's really important to push that idea of eating less meat and being healthier, except I'm allergic to lentils. So being able to have a vegan sort of rice dish is really tricky if you can't have peas, beans, or lentils. It sort of becomes just rice and some spices. So depending on what you're looking for, you can absolutely have a look there. I can see in the chat already we've started talking about what's been happening in the racing itself, which we'll absolutely come to. But I think it's really important to point out why we're here as Octopus as well. So Octopus was set up about 20 years ago, believe it or not. And initially it was set up as an investments business. And back then it really looked to channel 3 main pillowstones when it came to sort of the world of tech and the world of sort of changing the way we looked at the world. They really wanted to make 3 main ways of channeling sort of transparency, clarity, and sustainability into their world. At that point, probably a lot of the investment industry was looking at safe as houses rather than looking at things that sort of brought on a change into the future. 3 businesses that they invested in early were LoveFilm, SwiftKey, and Zoopla. Many people that are on here probably will have maybe used SwiftKey. It's kind of a really cool thing that sits behind your keyboard and provides a bit of AI, which is really quite cool. And then LoveFilm, I think lots of people at this point go, why is Charlie talking about a defunct, dead system called LoveFilm? But actually, that sort of became Amazon Prime in the UK, so it's quite an interesting sort of change there. But I think Zoopla is really the one that sort of channels that transparency, clarity, and sustainability, and helps people understand what we really mean by that. Because I think it's really easy to put that at the bottom of your emails. It's really easy to put it in your company handbook. It's really easy to sort of get it tattooed across your chest, but not really mean it. What we actually mean is that for the buyer with Zoopla, they get to see other price houses on the street, and they also get to see whether or not that house has been sold 6 times in the last 10 years. Basically, is it haunted or not? Then also what we get to do as a seller is see other house prices on the street and see how your advert is doing and whether or not the estate agent is pulling the wool over your eyes. And the sustainability comes in making sure that sort of estate agent does the right thing moving forward and makes the differences in not pulling the wool over people's eyes. It allows customers to make informed decisions. And I think sort of seeking that change in industry is really incredible. And that, I think, is where the alignment with Extreme E outside of the renewables and the energy and the electric cars come in that make me so passionate about that. In 2014, the 2 men, Simon Rochester and Chris Hewlett, that set up Octopus met a man called Greg Jackson. Now, Simon and Chris, off the back of all of this investment, had become the largest investor in solar in the UK and the 3rd largest investor in wind. And what this meant was that they had this rather large understanding of how renewables work or worked. Greg came to them and said, hey, I would love to start an energy business, which is basically like Southwest Airlines. If you don't know about Southwest, what they did was they kind of changed the way that Americans perceived air travel and stopped it being like this elitist luxury thing and being this thing that everybody could access. You could argue that they were responsible for the budget airline boom, but they didn't really start a budget airline. They started an airline to challenge road and rail. And in the same way, Greg sees the fossil fuel industry as his main opponent long-term or our carbon-based economy. Our boss, or my boss, Fiona, joined Greg at Octopus to help bring tech into the home to make it more easy to see how to do things, to make it more transparent. And what then happened was that she went to go and buy an electric car. She was told it would take 38 hours to charge. She couldn't use her gross salary to pay for it. And Fiona, lots of other mums have bought this diesel SUV. Do you want one of those instead? And what she realized was that transparency, clarity, and sustainability was missing from that car buying journey. 4 years later, Octopus electric vehicles are here. We're primarily an electric vehicle leasing business that will get you a car, a charger, and renewable energy tariff, all under one roof. So you go and speak to one person, you make sure that they get all the solution and get it all sorted for you before you get a car, a charger, and a renewable energy tariff at your home at the same time, rather than having to go to 4 or 5 different people. We have partners in that help us, but you still speak to 1 or 2 people. And where I feel that the EV Group Nexus really helps in that is that you can check that if you join a workshop where we're speaking about electric cars, you can then go and ask Heather whether or not Charlie is lying or not, and help understand what's it really like to live with an electric car. With us today, we have Emily. She's already introduced herself, but I don't know, Emily, if you want to talk about your history, what you've done, where you've seen some stuff with electric cars and how that all goes. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Yeah, sure.
Wait a second, sorry. I need to turn you up. There you go.
Ah, is that me?
Yes,
can you hear me? Yeah, bro. Okay, so yeah, my racing background is in sort of I've raced C1s, Saxos, Minis, all sorts of different things. My interests definitely lie in electric vehicles. EV racing is something quite new to the motorsport scene, and as with all sort of technology innovations in motorsport, starts at the top level, and then we'll see it sort of start to filter down through to the kind of grassroots level. So Formula E started a few years ago, same organisers behind Extreme E. Massive fan of Formula E. I've been out to Monaco to see the racing live. I think it's absolutely wonderful. However, what Extreme E are feeling is, as you mentioned earlier, Charlie, is that more holistic view of sustainability. So not only are the cars themselves electric and you're looking at a more sustainable means of powering the race cars, but additionally they've gone for a more sustainable paddock, travelling. They've thought of everything, and so I think that's really interesting and really important to the sport as a whole. So I certainly hope that we'll see a lot of those innovations trickling down to the grassroots level of motorsport and areas of motorsport that are perhaps more accessible for somebody of my level.
Amazing. I'm just going to turn myself back up, but I think that's really important, actually, what you're saying there as well. And I think the bit that I find really exciting is that I got into racing through Gran Turismo. So I was part of GT Academy. For those of you that don't know what that means, is that basically I raced on PlayStation for 8 or 9 hours a day. And in 2012, I was taken to Silverstone to do some training and compete with other people to see whether or not I could become a Nissan racing driver. I finished 5th, which meant that I didn't become a Nissan racing driver, but I got to sample some stuff. And I think we're seeing this world now where motorsport used to be really quite an exclusive sort of club of really rich people being able to do it. And there's some of that still going on, right? Especially we were talking about a certain dirty motorsport called Formula One the other day, and how many of those drivers are actually the fastest in the world. And I think you're going to come on and speak a little bit about that when we sort of showcase the cool stuff there. The other reason that I really wanted you involved is because I think you're arguably one of Scotland's foremost female racing drivers. Would that be fair to say? And I think to the way that Extreme is lining up to have both a male and a female driver in every single team makes it an interesting sort of change to the status quo, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a similar, or would you call it a similar setup? The W Series a few years ago came out with a concept for an all-women's racing championship. I think what's so interesting about Extreme E is they're not going to one extreme or the other and saying all male or all female, but they're going for a 50-50 split. And that's something we've never seen in motorsport before. So as you say, Charlie, we'll come on to speak about it in more depth later on. But from an equality of opportunity point of view, I think it's a fantastic idea. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that pans out and to see what impact that has on the amount of females competing in high levels of motorsport in a few years' time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we've got a comment from Bob saying it's not anymore. It's still a rich man's game, and it is, right. But I think the top tiers of motorsport are really, or the lots of people at the top of motorsport are looking at how do they actually stop this from dying in 5-10 years time, when we're all driving electric and we're all thinking about the world being a bit fairer. How do we start to bring more inclusivity to people that want to go racing? And I think that's sort of the big boom of sim racing through. I used to be one of the fastest in the world at dirt before COVID happened, and then all of a sudden, like, so many rally drivers are coming in and showing up just like what a real rally driver can do on something like Colin McRae dirt. Whereas before it was just sort of passionate people sat in their bedroom who would bother to buy a steering wheel. But now it's like every sort of major race series has gone, yeah, we can do sim racing too. Which, yeah, sort of, I remember when I first turned up at Knockhill and was like, yeah, as part of GT Academy, I raced sort of sims. Everybody was like, what are you on about? Like, this is mental. And now it's like, all right, okay, cool, yeah, fine. Like, it's an interesting thing. I wonder, is that happening with females as well?
The move over to sim racing, do you mean?
No, sorry. I meant that idea that a wee while ago, if I said that I'd done sim racing, it was very much like, all right, okay, fair enough. Like, and actually sort of brushed it off as, yeah, we won't really listen to what's going on there. And now it's like, oh no, actually, that is a legitimate route in, and that is something that we have to respect.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I think, especially as you say, during lockdown, there's been a massive rise in sim racing, and it's been taken a lot more seriously. I guess you see that throughout the gaming world as a whole. It's not only sim racing, you know, people that are into Call of Duty and other sort of games online. There's certainly all these streaming platforms and things. There's been a massive rise and appreciation of people that have perfected a skill. You know, whether it's online or whether it's in real life, these people are the best at what they do. So they should certainly gain respect from that. But yeah, definitely there's more routes for people starting on sims and then competitions, shootout competitions, to have the opportunity to take those skills and put them into real life competition. So yeah, it's very interesting, and it's cool to see drivers coming into the sport in a different way.
Absolutely. So we should probably talk a little bit about the car itself that they're racing, which is fully electric. Now, for all of those of you that are on and maybe be watching something, please do grab a second screen. I have got mine down here. I'm keeping a wee eye out for when we believe the shootout race will come first, and then we will have the live final. Extreme E have been fairly sort of close guarding the times of what's been happening. They've kept it really close to their chest and not really spoken about what's going on. But the Odyssey 21 is the SUV, they're calling it, that is racing in the 5 locations around the world. It doesn't really look like an SUV, Heather. I think if you tried to put the dogs in it, it'd be a bit of a tight squeeze, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Amazing. So it's a purpose-built race car by Spark, who kind of sort of came out of Dallara. I know that Dallara worked quite closely with Spark for Formula E, and it's a purpose-built electric race car. It looks a bit like a Tonka toy, right? I don't know how you would feel, Emily, if you had to drive it around Knockhill. How do you think that would feel?
Yeah, very high off the ground. I think there'd be a lot of body roll. They're certainly designed for multiple off-road surfaces, and not flat, twisty tarmac circuits.
Amazing. I think it's kind of, they've really thought about real sort of what's the word I'm looking for? I know the word I'm looking for. Sustainability at its core. Like, Andrew Flintoff was telling us that the tires are made out of dandelion, apparently, and that the weave of some of the carbon is no longer carbon, but you can use hemp or you can use other forms of weave, which, like, with your product design stuff, must be really exciting to see all that new sort of tech coming through there as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the more holistic view of sustainability in motorsport. It's not just the petrol or the fuel that needs to change. It's everything. So right down to the materials that the tyres and the body panels are made of, But as with all technology in motorsport, that's not going to only filter down to the grassroots levels of motorsport. It's going to filter down into road cars, which I'm sure you'll come on to later about, this amazing innovations and things that we're seeing in batteries in Formula E, and how these are transferring down to whether it be road cars or other modes of transport for the public. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about that technology. I mean, I don't know how many people that are watching right now have jumped on the London Tube, but did you know that if you jump on the London Tube, you're actually running on a motor that won Le Mans? Like, it's a very strange sort of thing to think about, that especially as transportation changes as well, motorsport has to really think about how does that sustainability piece play into changing the way, because it's much less about selling cars now, right? Like 20, 30 years ago, it was about selling cars. Like if you were BMW, you raced your M3, you won the DTM, and then you sold a whole load of M3s because everybody saw your race car. And I think now it's much less about that and much more about the individual technologies that you can see coming through to help make those differences. You could argue maybe sometime around Senna's death that made a big change as well, with that holistic approach to looking at safety as well. But I think it's this now is the combination of those years of thought process of building that out and starting to come to that point. Now, the Odyssey 21 has about 550 horsepower. It does 0 to 60 in about 4.5 seconds. But remember, that's on any surface. So if there's anybody here with a Tesla that's like, oh, but my Tesla does it in 3.1, yeah, try doing that on ice in your Tesla, or try taking it down to the beach. Please don't do that. Don't take it down to Brighton and start doing drag racing down the beach or along the seaweed. But the idea is that power and that torque delivery is off the chain in terms of what it can do. And I think we see that with that 100 meter drop that's at 45 degrees, which if you haven't seen it yet is like doing a Rouge backwards, Radeon actually backwards. And that's something, again, that we've not really seen in motorsport in a racing sense. We've seen in Dakar, we've seen lots of cool little bits come together, but I don't think we've ever seen this sit quite the same way, where it all gets put into one place and really makes us think about sort of pushing forward with that. Something that I was really excited to note as well is talking about this technology coming back and filtering through into normal road cars. Believe it or not, these cars charge on CCS. So these cars charge on your standard European type charger. So Heather, I know you've been bouncing about all over Scotland. You've got CHAdeMOs and CCS everywhere. So you could charge, I think that's very different to, Emily, what you were saying about like motorsport impacting normal cars. It looks like actually sort of the normal electric car has now impacted motorsport in kind of going, well, do you know what? We've got this really easy solution that's just sort of European standard. Should we just use that? I remember going to Formula E testing in 2014, and they'd unplug the battery from the car and then plug it into the charger. And I was like, that's just such a waste of time. Why can't you just have a charger that plugs straight in and goes in there? And I think the other thing, the tech that we're seeing being developed in that sort of that realm here of like big boxes of hydrogen that get bussed around and then dropped, and then all the cars are charging on zero carbon electricity. It's so cool, and they're charging so quickly at locations as well. I think there is a little bit about range. I think if anybody saw Andrew Flintoff drive the car, he was talking about range. But Emily, you'll know, like my race car, my Legend has a fuel tank of like 25 litres, right? Because I'm doing 12-minute races. I don't need, actually, if I took that down the motorway, I would do like 50 miles and then grind to a halt. And I think it's the same with other things as well, right? We think far too much in the EV world about that range and about range anxiety, when actually, realistically, you would never go into your garage with your C1 and be like, how big's the fuel tank? How far can I go? Does it get me to the end of the race? Cool, let's go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most of my experience comes from racing saloon cars that have been designed for the road, stick a roll cage in them and take them on track. So they have big fuel tanks, but we would never dream of putting any more than the bare minimum of fuel that you need to get round the track. And it's simply due to weight. But in addition to that, racing is hard. It's hard on the body. It's a physical challenge. So being in a race car for a 10 minutes is sprint, you're going to be, physically exhausted getting out the car at the end of that. So you're not necessarily wanting to have an unlimited range to race for several hours on end. So I think even just a 10-minute hardcore race across the desert is going to be enough to really, prove the challenge.
Amazing. So that anybody that was maybe new to electric cars can understand what we're talking about. We're talking about this charger here. I'm pointing over here because I have it on my screen, but I know that it's probably here on screen for everybody else. And this CCS adapter is basically European standard now. It will be rolling out right the way across the UK and across Europe as well. And we'll slowly see this become the standard, especially as Nissan are rolling back and building CCS into the new car that they have as well. I think the era of thinking that you have like 7 million different kinds of chargers and that they all plug in different ways is kind of gone. If you go out and buy a second-hand car, you have a choice of one, you've got a choice of 2 chargers. And if you're looking at any new car now in the UK, you're going to be running this sort of standard Type 2, which is at the top there, and then that CCS, which is that larger, faster charger, which enables you to do long distance. And the other thing that I think Extreme really provides me with a whole load of confidence in is the idea that actually, how do we not need to worry about maybe smaller manufacturers using this? Well, it looks like it's just off the shelf and should be able to just be plugged in and good to go nice and early and get that sorted. I can see Leanne, I do see some newbies still being confused by AC. Absolutely. I think it's really the world is full of misinformation around electric vehicles, and I don't think it's actually people's fault. I think even for somebody like Emily, what might happen is that, Emily, your blog or your Facebook was really sort of pushing electric vehicles. Somebody like Honda might come along to you and be like, hey, do you want to borrow a Honda EV for the weekend? And you borrow it. And then you write about how terrible the charging was because they haven't actually helped you understand how the charging works. And that's where these groups, these EV Groups Nexus, Sussex EVs, things like that really help, because you can go and ask them questions like, Heather, how do you charge your car? Do you wait till it runs out of charge, or do you actually charge it every day, or do you wait till the fuel light comes on and then plug it in?
I tend to charge at home, Charlie. Obviously, with lockdown, I haven't been going as much, but I've only got a 24 kilowatt hour Leaf, so the battery is relatively small compared to a lot of the new ones. So when I was going to work, I'd probably charge it maybe every second day, but I don't top it up to like 100% and have it like at that all the time, sort of thing. So I tend to just leave it until it maybe gets to about 20 miles, and then I better charge it in case I need to go somewhere. So,
but it's different, right? And I think that's the thing, right? Is that actually the way that you interact with your electric car and charge it is very different to the way that you react to your petrol car. And I think, Emily, if you've never had the experience of driving it, like, it's not your fault that you turn around and then say, yeah, this charging's really tricky because I don't know what I'm doing. And that's not your fault. That's the people that are helping you get into the car. And I think that's where people like the EV Group's Nexus and what we can do with workshops and connecting you to those people is really, really important. And Leanne, coming back to you on that idea that it can be so confusing, it absolutely can be if we don't provide the right information at the right time to help you get that all up to speed and sorted. Now, what I still do is I'm still having a quick look at what's going on. They're still showing the highlights from the semi-final, which happened earlier today, but we are going to come on and talk about that. I know Emily and I have been getting up nice and early yesterday and today to try and fill you in on everything that's been happening and get you up to speed. What we might find is that if we do cut off in the next half hour to a race, I will shut up and just put everybody on mute so that you can go and enjoy the race, and then we'll come back for questions after. But Emily, what struck you first? I think you got up and you messaged me sort of round about 11:30, 12 o'clock yesterday, just sort of in awe almost of what's going on, right?
Yeah, what a brilliant start. The eyes of the world were very much on this, and I think it was very important that there was an action-packed first round. Innovation in motorsport, I think, when it comes to sustainability, is still met with a bit of resistance to change. So it's really important that it went well and kind of captured the excitement of all the watchers, and it certainly did. There was punctures, there was rolls, there were some amazing drives. So yeah, I think it couldn't have got off to a better start.
Amazing. I think what we'll do is we'll give you, for those of you that maybe haven't watched it or haven't been involved or haven't seen what it is, it'd be really cool to give people a brief roundup of kind of what happens and how it works. It's kind of a cross between rallycross and rallying, right? It's like rallycross, but without the tarmac anywhere in sight in the middle of the desert, right?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly more comparable perhaps to something like Dakar.
Absolutely. For those of you that don't know what Dakar is short for Paris to Dakar, and it used to be a race, believe it or not, from Paris to Dakar. And people would drive down to South France, get a boat across into Africa, and then they would race to Dakar. That sort of stopped mid-2000s because of some sort of issues with safety, and also it's a bit silly just driving through the desert and not knowing where anybody is. Of course, you maybe have a helicopter that takes people to hospital, but if you have a motorbike rider who's crashed 40 miles away, how do you make sure you get your motorbike rider and your racing driver? So they sort of combined it together and started building stages, and they did that out in Argentina and South America, and then they brought it back to the Middle East recently as well. But the big difference there, Emily, is it's less sprint racing, right? It's day on day, it's really tough, but it's not quite as sort of elbows out, let's get in as fast as possible, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's exciting about Extreme E, is it really is a format that we've never ever seen before. They've taken elements that have worked from various championships like Rallycross, like Dakar, and they've combined them all together to create something that's completely new.
Amazing. And then so the way that works is that on this Saturday, they do qualifying runs, which are purely timed, a little bit like Formula One, where they go out and they set a lap time, and then they swap over and they have another lap time. Now, we'll come over to the swap in a minute, because I know people are going to swap. What? And it's not a car swap like in Formula E. It's something else. And that then enables them, it's about 5-6 minutes per lap. I think the fastest people were getting it done in like 4.5 minutes, something around that. And they go out and then they do another lap, and then they cross the line. And then on the Sunday, all of the timing goes out the window. They pick their grid slots. That's what the qualifying's for, is to help them pick their grid slots and to win some points. And then what they do is they move to a real racing format where they all sit next to each other. So that's what's happened this morning, is we've had 3 people side by side, all ready to get going, again with a swap in the middle, and the first person across the line wins. Emily, I know we have our picks, or the people that we sent out in our little booklet sort of on Thursday about who we thought might do really well. Who impressed you, or who were you maybe gutted to not see have a chance to prove what they could do? Actually, before we do that spot sort of spoils it a little bit, right? Because I think I know who you're going to say. With that male-female split, right? That's what the switch is, right? That's what the switch is. They're swapping out of the seat. And we saw them, they can make the choice of who goes in when, right? So we saw them choosing or trialing, putting the girl in first and then having the boy go, and then they did it the other way around. I think a lot from that is sort of going on with an idea of what's fastest, right?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, yesterday was the first time that we saw these cars in this championship on track, so nobody really knew what was going to be most efficient and what was going to be quickest. I'm sure they had all gone away and practiced it in advance, and what most teams, all bar one, if I remember correctly, had chosen to do was to put their male drivers out first and their female drivers out second. And what they were saying was that they had chosen to do that simply because they reckoned that it would be quickest to do the driver change in that direction, because typically the female driver is going to be a little bit smaller or slighter built than the male, and therefore the harness straps just need to be tightened rather than loosened and then tightened again. And if anybody's ever been in a car with a harness system, or even, I like to compare it a little bit to a rucksack, which you can like tighten the straps on, it's so much easier to pull down on those and tighten them than it is to loosen them, because to loosen you almost need two hands. So you have to take your hands off the steering wheel, you need to be stopped, they can be really fiddly and get jammed quite easily. So it's actually a lot quicker if the male driver can just hop out, female driver in, tighten those straps, and away you go. And we certainly saw most of the teams yesterday choosing to do it in that order for that reason.
But then in the afternoon, sort of the Excite My Energy team came up with a sort of brainwave, didn't they? Because what they'd realised was that a lot of those slighter build drivers, even male drivers as well, will sometimes race with a seat insert. You sort of feel like a child, right? I remember getting one made at Caterham and feeling like bringing it into work to go on track days. I felt like I was bringing my booster seat and I wasn't quite big enough to go racing properly. But they worked out that actually taking that out was quicker than putting it in, and it was more comfortable for the female to jump out and pull that and get it right before she went out, rather than sort of trying to fix that. And they swapped it back the other way for the afternoon, right?
Yeah, that's a point as well. I guess it depends how your seat insert's made. I remember doing an endurance race a few years ago, and I was the only female driver in a team of there was about 5 of us, I think. And certainly sticking that seat insert into the car and having to actually feed the harness straps through the holes in the seat liner, bring them back out to the side, then squeeze yourself in. You can't see because you're wearing a helmet, you've got gloves on, there's all sorts of hands flying everywhere trying to get the car ready, and then trying to do this harness up below your line of vision. It's a real challenge. So definitely, that's a good point. The seat liner is definitely something that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah. So I suppose we should really talk about what's happening there, right? Is that with this sort of idea of half male, half female, we're seeing some of, I would argue, some of the greatest racing drivers of this generation competing. Maybe Lewis would count as part of that, and Fernando would be in there as well. Fernando Alonso, for those of you that maybe think I'm speaking in tongues. But I think we've got some really big names, and people like Sebastian Loeb, Johan Kristoffersen, Carlos Sainz, they carry a real weight. And I wonder whether as a new female racing driver, I know there's one in particular who didn't get to show just how quick she possibly really is. If that could be a little bit intimidating, I wonder. How would you feel being there on that grid?
Sure. A difficult one. We spoke about this yesterday, obviously. There is an experience deficit between the female and male drivers, and perhaps we could shortly come on to why that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Myself, obviously there's some amazing names on the grid, both in the male and female groups. So there's a lot of pressure riding on these drivers, especially those who are changing over from other disciplines. You've not just got people with rally and rallycross experience, which is possibly more transferable, but you've also got people like Jamie Chadwick coming over from circuit racing. One of the other female drivers has come over from two-wheeled racing, from motorbike racing, I believe, which is a massive change in discipline. So it's really interesting to see how a lot of these drivers are going to need to kind of learn on their feet and adapt to a new sport, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a really good question, actually, from Sina007 UK. I don't know if that's his real name, whether or not he tears it up round Suzuka in the final races of the season. However, he says, why is it that some teams put the seat insert in from the same side of the car as the driver gets out, while the other put it in from the other. Surely it's quicker to put the seat in from one side and get out. I think that's down to driver preference and some drivers who are used to pulling those seat inserts. You can see it in Le Mans, can't you? Is that seat insert is almost the responsibility of the driver. And it's whether or not you're used to that, right? Is that I know that when I was getting out of Caterhams, I would always have to think about steering wheel and putting steering wheel back and taking my seat insert out. That was the two things that were my role when I was getting out the car. I don't know, is that's the way it is, right? You have a role and you just do those jobs. And I think that depends on what those drivers are comfortable with, right?
Yeah, practice makes perfect when it comes to that sort of thing. So they'll have practiced their pit stops over and over again, and they'll have each been assigned a role that they'll have to get ingrained in their head, so they know as soon as they come to a halt, they're out the left with their seat liner and they're off. Whatever works for them, I imagine it'll be personal preference for each team. So just whatever works best.
Or that you're loosening, and therefore because you're loosening, the other person's reaching in and grabbing the seat liner, and that's why they're going in from the other side. I think it's a really good question though, because it is like, why do some people do something, and it is just down to personal preference.
I believe there is a rule as well, actually. Sorry, Charlie, I did forget. Two hands on the car at one time, or two people on the car at one time. So therefore, you can't have hundreds of these team members, each with one role to do. So therefore, the driver does really need to get involved in order to make that switch as quick as possible. So giving them a job to do, like taking their seat liner with them or putting the seat liner in for themselves, is going to be vital.
Well, Matthias Ekstrom published photos. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. Matthias Ekstrom is ex-DTM. He runs his own rallycross team. He's competed at Dakar. He's doing Extreme E. He was like mucking in and actually getting underneath cars and changing bits because, again, from the sustainability point of view, they're running on like skeleton teams rather than sort of Formula One of 1,800 people being flown out per team to well, I suppose that's Mercedes, but somebody like Haas maybe have 300, but they're not flying loads of people out to come and help them, which is really cool. I think there's another question here from Colin. I think, Emily, we actually touched on this the other day when we were talking about the racing, which are the penalties can seem pretty harsh. But I think that's down to keeping people safe in that driver change, right?
Yeah, I would agree. There was a few kind of shockers yesterday, I suppose you could say, that really split the field and left big gaps due to penalties being handed out. But when it comes to speeding in the pit lane, you just really, it doesn't matter which series you're in, that's always been the case. You just can't do it. It's too dangerous. There could be people moving about and people could get seriously hurt. So I guess, first round, they want to show how seriously they're taking that. So there's not going to be any exceptions to that rule.
Yeah.
And
especially when we're at Knock Hill, somebody stands just over that blind crest, don't they? Just when you come back into the pit lane, just over that blind crest, there's somebody with a gun making sure that you're not speeding. And I don't even have a speedo in my car, so I've got no idea what speed I'm going. I'm the same as other people around me. I'm okay. I don't even have a pit limiter button, so I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just like, I'm just going to go in second and come off everything and just roll through.
Sometimes you kind of have to go on the expression of others standing around. Do they look horrified or are they smiling?
Are they like, come on? Or are they like...
It's really hard. I think it's worth giving a bit of attention to the fact that when you've just come off the track and you are full of adrenaline and you've just been driving flat out, your perception of speed is very warped. So, watching the Extreme E yesterday, it's very easy to say, how could drivers, these professional drivers, possibly be making so many mistakes when it comes to slowing the car down and driving at a certain nominated speed? And it's because that feels so unbelievably slow. If you imagine you've been driving along the motorway for how long, sitting at 70, and then suddenly you're doing, 15 mile an hour or something, it feels dead slow. It feels walking pace in comparison. And when you're so hyped up, it is so hard to tell yourself to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those penalties, we've seen one rather large crash from a driver who traditionally competed on motorbikes. And I think that sort of came, and you could see that struggle to cope with that slide. And then we saw Stefan Sarazan, who is arguably should be one of the fastest here because of everything that he's done, sort of competed with Loeb in rallying, competed at Le Mans, like everything. He should be super switched on, hitting a little tuft of grass, rolling the car and stopping a real British possibility in Jamie Chadwick coming out and really, really making an impact, right?
Yeah, that was a real shame for Veloci Racing. Obviously, what a great advert for the cars that they're strong enough to withstand these sorts of impacts, but they were right to withdraw the vehicle on the basis of just a slight safety concern there with the roll cage. But what a shame that we didn't get to see Jamie Chadwick out there. She won the W Series, the all-female single-seater racing series, and it would have been really interesting to have seen her transition from circuits onto an off-road surface. So hopefully at the next round, I'm sure they'll be back, we'll see her in action. But it's important to remember that obviously it's been a massive learning curve for all the teams taking part this weekend, and they have learned so much in the first round. So that team will be coming into the next round very much on the back foot, having not had the opportunity to get that seat time. So I think we'll definitely need to take that into account next time round.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we saw sort of this morning, we saw the top folks get through into the first semi-final. Then we saw something they're calling the Crazy Race, which actually, I don't know if that makes us feel more like it's Mario Kart than it's real life racing. And then we're going to see the final coming up fairly soon, sort of the next half hour, sort of 40 minutes sort of time, we reckon. And we saw some interesting moves by some interesting people, but also we kind of, I don't know, we were discussing this yesterday about how we completely almost not lucked in, but we completely called it. We thought we were sort of, I thought I was, I don't know about Kristoffersson, I don't know, but I know he's super quick. I'm going to call it. And you did the same with Loeb, right? You were like, yeah, I'll put Loeb in there because he's a safe pair of hands. I know what's going on. And lo and behold, they're in the final. It's amazing. It's like we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's always a stab in the dark at the start of a new championship, and especially when it's something so new, both in terms of format, the car, the surface. You never really knew who was going to come out on top. But yeah, I think you've given it a good effort, and all four in the final, so there you go.
Amazing. What made you pick? I suppose we can talk about sort of the history of Johan Kristoffersson and the history of Seb. Really give us an idea of what makes them so unbelievably quick and reliable. But for the reason I picked Sarah was because I think we discussed this as well around sort of licensing and how are they working out who's going racing. And I think it's a real shame that Chip Ganassi never got to actually show what their car could do again, because Kyle Leduc sort of crashed and wrecked the power steering, so they weren't able to get through. But Sarah used to race trophy trucks. She's raced on motorbikes. She's raced on dirt. Like, she's used to having people right next to her and going toe to toe and having people bumping into one another. Whereas Katie, and again, Collins just brought up the name Molly Taylor. Like, the two are so fast. You can see they're so fast. But do they have they been elbow to elbow? And I wonder how that feels for them. I wonder how that feels for the less experienced, because we've got Carlos Sainz as well, right? Who multiple world champion, but has never got elbows out apart from maybe on the karting circuit, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that will start to show, especially as we head into other rounds. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the final today. But given the amount of sand and the lack of visibility in the desert, I'm not sure how wheel to wheel the cars really will be. But as we go into rounds, say, in the rainforest, on ice and things like that, they will be getting a lot closer together. And a lot of drivers who haven't experienced that feeling of having someone so close to them will panic and will have, to really learn quickly to adapt to that. So it will be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's been such an amazing comeback drive from United Autos. United Andretti, I keep calling them United Autosports, but United Andretti, right? That having that puncture on day one, Katie Munnings driving through that puncture as well, broadsiding down what should have been the easiest bit of roads to drive down, really brought home some really strong results. I think it's really important to point out as well that all of these people are in different teams, which is what's in those brackets there. So for those of you that are watching, please don't think that if you get confused that Katie is starting next to Sebastian Loeb in the final, that is that they're in the same team. Katie is partnered with the Hansons at Andretti United or United Andretti, whatever they're going to call themselves. And then the same with Johan is sort of partnered with Molly Taylor. I think I'd never heard of Molly Taylor until she was announced in Extreme E, but she's a different talent, isn't she? She's a whole nother level of fast.
Yeah, she really stood out yesterday, the way that she tackled, especially the mogul sections of the track. She really just launched it. And even, just on camera from outside the car, you could see that she was really, really gunning for it. So, yeah, I think between her and Katie Munnings were my two sort of standouts amongst the female drivers yesterday. It'll be interesting to see, as you say, how they cope with the wheel-to-wheel action.
Because hopefully they'll be racing one another. Like we don't want to sort of presume that the guys will be going out first, followed by the girls, but that seems to be what they've been doing so far. Potentially because of that early racecraft and gaining that little spot to get out in front of the dust, and then letting the rally drivers come in and potentially set the faster lap time, but not have to deal with the people around them. But if we get those two on circuit at the same time and give Katie a car that is not got a puncture, I think that would be a really incredible thing as well. I think for me, I still can't see past Johan Kristoffersson. He just always brings this cool, calm A game. You never see him flustered. You never see him worried about a start or things that are going on. And he does it in rallycross, he does it in the Swedish touring cars, he does it in the Porsche Carrera Cup. He gets out in front, he controls the race, he takes all the pressure off himself, and then just dominates from there. And if we take away the penalty from qualifying too, nobody's touched Kristoffersson or Molly Taylor, right?
You're right. I think on paper, they're certainly the strongest team and perhaps the favourites to win it. However, I think what yesterday demonstrated was that you can't tell until they've crossed the line, because these penalties for speeding in the pit lane and things like that are so extreme that they can have such a large effect.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I think you're absolutely right. So who do you think is, I suppose then, before we move on to the next slide, who do you think's winning today? Are you going to stick with Seb, or are you sticking with Seb, Katie, or are you joining Team Rosberg with Johan?
I hoped you wouldn't ask me this, because I don't want to give the commentators curse either. I'd love to see Katie and Hansen win it. I'm gonna put my money on them, just because they're a bit of an outlier rather than Johan.
Amazing. So for everybody else that's in the chat panel at the moment, if you want to pop in who you think you will see coming through, I think that will be really important there. I think we've also got, they're still showing the crazy race. They're still showing the end to that crazy race. So once that's over, we'll have a quick chat about where all the racing is. So if you are not got your second screen ready, just to reset the room a little bit, if you haven't got your second screen ready already, go grab something, whether that be an iPad, take your laptop to in front of your telly. You're live on BBC Sport on the website or on the red button. You're also live on ITV, but they will be following as of 12 o'clock. So you've got a couple of minutes to get settled for that. We probably expect that they're going to do the shootout race before they do the final. It'd be a bit weird to run the final and then run another race and all the glory go to the winner of the shootout race, even though they were the slowest yesterday. So what we're expecting is we'll see the shootout race, then we'll follow into the final. And also keep a wee eye out for over the next wee while. We will also run these for all the other races that we have, some right into the depths of winter. Some look really incredible. That glacier one's going to obviously be in the southern hemisphere. They're moving away from the Himalayas. They were going to do it in the Himalayas, but I think there were some issues around COVID and getting that all sorted. So they've moved to Argentina, so that'll be in the middle of the summer. And this should prove to be quite an exciting season of unknowns and not sure what's going on. I think it's going to be interesting because I think as we see more and more sort of attention be drawn to this, I think we'll see more and more people get interested in potentially having a round somewhere. I imagine I'd love to see something like this on Rannoch Moor up that way, up in Scotland, perhaps seeing it somewhere in, again, the Middle East or out towards the Far East as well, I think, or Australia. I think this starts to set the bar of what we should expect from racing cars moving forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. And like we've seen with Formula E, as it grows, as the attention is put onto the championship, you're going to have a lot more different, countries and people wanting to get involved. So hopefully we will see them going to different remote landscapes in the future and really shining a light on all the different kind of areas of the world.
Amazing. So what we'll do is we'll end the presentation there where we'll have a little chat. I suppose it's really important to open this up to questions as well. You can see us all on screen. So if you have any questions to us, I see that I'm a little bit out of focus. Hopefully I'll come back. There we go. If anybody has any questions for our panel, for Emily, for Heather, right now is the time to ask. As I said, if you head to ITV and to BBC, that's where you can get this race for free. We will not be showing it because we don't have the rights to be able to, but we will maybe not stay on mute. You might hear some expletives from Emily and I as stuff happens. Or if there's any big crashes or whatnot, we might get a little bit upset there or be talking. But it's really important. There's a brilliant question actually that's just come in from Colin. I don't know if anybody else saw that, about does the battery drain come into play as it does with Formula E? Now, Colin, I think that's kind of an exciting question to answer because Formula E very much is about improving that battery technology and about improving driver sort of understanding of that battery technology. Whereas I don't know exactly what Williams have done with this battery, but I doubt that it will lose. Laws of physics, it will lose a little bit of power as it drains, but I don't think it will lose the same amount of power. And they're not targeted on the amount of power that they need to use or not use by the end of the race. However, I think if you're a little bit wily and you've got something called hyperdrive, which is basically a push to pass button, which ups the performance of the car for 4 seconds each lap. If you're wily and use that at the right time, i.e. at the beginning of the longest straight, you're going to see the best advantage come from that. But then you might think to yourself, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep it. I'm going to press it just as I'm coming up the hill, and I'm going to sneak up the inside and not have the dust in front of me for going down that horrible 45-degree angle sort of roller coaster that looks just so confusing and so horrible to try. And then another question about will there be more teams joining in future? I don't know, but I think we can see the process of manufacturers really wanting to step up into this. I think Lewis going in and asking for more Mercedes backing in his new contract at Mercedes F1 team is a big sort of, I'm just going to put the rumours out there, then Emily can cover her hands as I'm talking about things that I really shouldn't. But we know that Lewis wanted a 1-year contract extension at Mercedes with the ability to then leave and have Mercedes backing for the rest of his life. I think that shows that he plans on turning X44 into a Mercedes Extreme E team. Nico Rosberg's been doing a lot of work with Audi, and we know that the VW Group are already in with Cupra, so an AB. So I think there's something in there that might be going on. Hummer are in with Chip Ganassi. And I think, again, we could see a lot of big manufacturers come in. I think somebody like Tesla have always said that they'd go and compete in Formula E when the battery tech lets them. When they're allowed to go and run their own battery in Formula E, they would go and do it. So again, with Extreme E, I imagine Tesla will, who knows, Emily and I might just buy a Cybertruck and go and turn up and see if it's got more power, it's got more range, and we could just drive through the other people because it's made of stainless steel rather than it's probably about 4 times the weight of all the other cars on the grid as well there. So I think that's really cool. I think if everybody is still on, that'd be brilliant. I think what would be really cool is have a little look in the handouts that we sent out. So if you joined us on Eventbrite, there'll be a handout, and in there you'll have had some stuff around sort of making coffee, which might be a little bit too close now to be able to do that while we're watching the race. But also there's a meal that you can create to have a sort of feeling of being at the event this evening. What we're also going to do is for the person that gets the best photo of them with their meal and tags us, so Octopus EV, whether that be Octopus EV with a capital EV on Twitter or _EV on Instagram, so Octopus _EV on Instagram, we will go and buy you something off the Extreme E store, a hat or a t-shirt or something like that, that will allow you to showcase just how much of an Extreme E fan you are. I think Emily and I will be jumping on that store afterwards and buying a whole lot of stuff, and people will question us in the street as to what we're so excited about. So I think, Emily, what would be going through your head right now? How would you be prepping for this final race? What would be thinking about the electricity? Would you be thinking about Colin's question about the cold and the batteries, or would you be zoned into the moment, or would these little things would these be niggling at you? Would you be thinking that you're getting confused, not confused, but would these be preying upon you? Sometimes that can happen, right? Like the tiniest little thing that somebody says to you can be like, yeah, I've not thought about that. What do I do?
Yeah, for sure. The pressure's definitely rising, and I feel it for them, for sure. I think most drivers have like a pre-race routine, I'm going to call it, with their race. Some people say they put their right glove on before their left. These sorts of things. Some people like to get themselves really kind of, I wouldn't say angry, but get themselves all fired up for the race. So they'll sit in the car, they'll get themselves strapped in, they'll start, shouting or these sorts of things to really get their energy.
Timmy Hansen, have you not seen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Timmy Hansen kicks himself like that while he's in
and
the
he's
car.
just getting himself in the zone.
You hurt yourself, what's going to happen?
It's part of it, isn't it? It's getting all those endorphins running through your body and getting yourself into the mindset and the position where you know that you perform best. So for some people, like Tim Hansen, as you said, that is getting yourself into this state where you're almost jittering with excitement. But for some people, possibly more myself, you need to calm right down. So as you said, there can be tiny little things that get inside your head, whether that's your mechanic telling you, oh, just by the way, just watch when you go into turn 1 because this, and you go, oh my goodness, what? And you start to let that overtake everything else. And you actually just need to sit, breathe, shut your eyes and visualize what you're going to do. Calm yourself right down, get the heart rate right down so you're completely focused on the job in hand.
Amazing. I remember my first race. I don't know if you were there at Knock Hill. My first ever race in Legends, somebody in front of me rolled 4 times on the start, and then another car took out the first 3 drivers on the second start, because the rookie who saw the roll was like, right, I can make up places now, and tried to go in too hard. Didn't quite come off the way that we wanted it to. But it did mean I moved up to 4th and finished 4th behind the safety car in my first ever race. So felt like a small victory at the same time as not being a small victory at all. trundling round at the back there. There's been another really cool question from Senna007, which is like, what other drivers would you like to see in the sport? He's saying Peter Solberg. We know Peter has, I think, or would be mega.
Sorry, Charlie, your audio's cutting out a little bit there.
Is it my audio that's going? Oh, that's really rubbish.
Yeah, you're okay now.
Disconnect from there. Am I okay now?
Yeah.
Cool. I was just saying, we've had a question about Peter Solberg coming in and racing. I think he's really focusing on his son Ollie now, right? But I think Ollie Solberg could be an amazing addition to this grid. Who would you like to see? Heather, are there any drivers you would like to see? Or is there anybody you know of you'd like to see, other than yourself? I mean, that's what Emily and I would say is proper racing drivers like ourselves. And we're good enough, if you don't know that. But apart from that.
No, I mean, really, the kind of main ones are the kind of there that I know of. So yeah, I don't really know of any other racing drivers that I would see on.
Emily, what about you? I think I'd like to see a reignition of the Rosberg-Hamilton rivalry, but rather than having teams actually put them in the car.
Wouldn't it be interesting to see Lewis Hamilton, obviously, and Rosberg, but their teams have done so well this weekend, and then you've got the likes of Jenson Button, who's actually chosen and made the brave decision, in my opinion, very brave decision, to put his reputation on the line, some might say, and go out himself in a formula which is very different to his experience. I think it would be very exciting to see Rosberg versus Hamilton again, but on a different surface and in a very different car.
I can see a whole load of names coming in here. David Coulthard, Kimi, Ken Block. I think Kimi would be able to. I mean, the sand was in my eyes and I didn't like it, so I'm not. I think he just wouldn't do it. He'd just not get out the car and complain. He's not going to spend 3 days on a boat. So I suppose we haven't commented on that yet, this idea that they're sort of sailing all the cars around on this boat, the St. Helena. They're taking them, rather than Formula One, which, cars are flying like 1,500 or 150,000 miles, rather than going sort of on a trip that sort of semi-follows the Earth. They sort of fly to Australia, or they didn't this year, but normally they sort of fly to Australia, then they come back to Europe, then they go out east, and then they come back to Europe, then they go to America, then they come back to Europe. Actually, they've really thought about how they're moving these things around the world. I can't see Kimi being stuck on that boat for 3 days while they're waiting and not drinking a whole load of alcohol to cope with what's going on here. I think DC or Ken Block could be excited. He's already tested. He already went sideways everywhere. Don't think he'd be very fast, but I think he'd look impressive.
Put on a good show.
Absolutely. I think that boat piece, and then they're working with climate change scientists on that boat as well. So this isn't just sort of going to these locations, racing. And I know, Emily, at the end of our races, like, how much rubbish do we have to put away? We've got oil we need to drain, we've got tires we want to throw away, we've got brake pads that need changed. And actually, that's really bad. And then beyond that as well, Knock Hill, Brands Hatch, Pembrey, we tear up the grass and we leave it like that, and we have to change. We have to have that resurfaced regularly. Whereas it looks like they're actually going in and saying, right, how do we make this better than when we arrived?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting concept. And again, that's in line with their sort of more holistic view of making motorsport more sustainable. I always call it the sort of motorsport travelling circus. You arrive in this paddock, there's all these trucks, awnings, there's hundreds of people. You forget just how many people go into running a race weekend. You've not just got the drivers and the mechanics running the car. You've got, the media crews. Who's behind this camera that we're going to be, watching this amazing footage shortly? There'll be crews running that, editing it all together. There's the journalists. There's the race marshals and crews, there's medics, there's so many different people involved, and they will come from all over. So as you briefly touched on earlier, running these extreme events with the minimum number of people will help, and those who need to attend, getting them there by the most sustainable means. So this adapted ex-Royal Mailship will certainly make a difference.
I can see just from the footage that I have in the corner that the shootout race has begun. So the final positions, or it's just the highlights. Actually, it looks like we've missed that somehow. I don't know quite how we've missed that, because we've had all of the live footage. I watched all the footage this morning and all the footage now. We have 2 cars going round. It's kind of a bit academic at the end of this, isn't it? It's for 2 or 4 points. So I think these drivers will be going out to learn as much as possible rather than to gain points or to go as quickly as possible. I think this does show that we're not too far away from that big final where the pressure is hyping up, and get that sorted there. I think what's the race that you're most looking forward to, Heather? What out of those 4 that we've got left, the rainforest, the Arctic, the Himalayas, and the beach or the ocean, which is the one that you're most excited by?
I think the Arctic one will be pretty cool, pretty exciting. Yeah, I think that will be. I think, especially with the batteries, to see how the last with the extreme cold weather as well. So.
Yeah, maybe not using hyperdrive might be the ticket. Emily, what about you?
I'm excited for the rainforest, just because I'm intrigued to see whether they will run through the rainforest, as in through the trees, or through areas of the rainforest that have been cleared and knocked down. And yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about which I'd rather they did, but it will be exciting for sure to see how they're going to run that, causing minimal damage to the environment.
Yeah. I think I'm most excited about Senegal now, having seen what they've done with the drop off. I can imagine them going into the water and then back out. I think that could be really exciting if they do that.
Yeah,
something a gate that's sort of 4 feet 2 feet underwater, and they need to get in and get back out. That could be really exciting, and get that sorted. We've got a message from Colin saying that they didn't live stream the shootout, which makes no sense. A lot of the timings have been a bit funny around this, but I think that's because they are in the middle of the desert and they are streaming this all through satellites and whatnot to get back to where it needs to be. I think the understanding of a lot of drone footage as well is being used to make this be the way it is. So, as we're saying, I would now start looking at the time. It's like 12:15. I would really start looking to get that coffee placed, to go and get whatever snacks you have that you want to watch while the race is going on. I think we're getting really close to that beginning now. I think there'll be a presentation at the end. It'll probably be 10, 15 minutes. So if we look at the race being 10 minutes as well, plus all the media afterwards, we know that the programme ends at 1. We're pretty much on for a race probably in the next 10, 15 minutes. So I think if you can go jump to the loo, get everything you need sorted, do all that, that's absolutely fantastic. We're going to stay online while the race happens, but we're going to mute ourselves, as I said, so you don't hear our expletives from when cool things happen. But please do ask questions in the chat panel, do ask questions as we go on. If there is anything you want to learn, anything you want to see, then that is all good while we do so. Heather, Emily, do you need to jump to the loo or grab a water, or are you all good?
Ready to go.
Yeah.
You're ready to go? Amazing. And I know we can't talk too much about it, Emily, because of other stuff, but you specifically look into how things could be safer for women in motorsport, right?
Sure.
Is that giving way too much, or can we?
No, that's all right.
It?
So my dissertation project is looking at safety equipment in motorsport, and basically if there's any adaptations that are needed for women specifically. So motorsport is traditionally a male-dominated industry, and therefore the majority of racewear and equipment is designed to suit the male body, which is fair enough. However, with this rise in female participation in motorsport, there's definitely a market for female-specific racewear, And what I'm trying to determine is basically, are women more at risk wearing equipment that is designed for the male body, if you like, and are there additional products that potentially we need in order to keep ourselves safe on track? It's been really interesting. I've really enjoyed it, and I've certainly learned a lot about the FIA specs, and especially when it comes to kind of fire safety and also the kind of general rates of injury in sport. So there's a little bit of evidence out there, if you're interested, to show that women are potentially at greater risk of sports-related injuries. So whether that be in like football or running, and it's for a multitude of reasons, but one of them is to do with hormonal fluctuations in the female body, and how that affects like muscles and ligaments, and basically makes them a little looser at certain times of the month or certain times of the cycle, and that can actually increase your risk of injury. So
That's
yeah,
really
it's been really interesting,
yeah,
for sure.
When I was growing up, I was a ballet dancer. So I was a ballet dancer for about 5 years. And they always used to tell us that the reason that we were stiff as boys was because our bones would grow before our muscles. And therefore that was the reason that girls were. So I don't know if it's actually true. I think it was just a whole load of sort of to make us stretch hard. I think it was that we didn't have the same pain threshold as most of the girls because they were going on point. But I think it was something that told us to make us feel better. But it's really interesting to know of those things, really. And I think without things like W Series, without things like Extreme E, would that rate, or would it have the same understanding? Or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, definitely. Rise of females in motorsport has put a spotlight on issues that were already there, and obviously, regardless of whether there's a handful of girls or hundreds of girls, they should be kept safe. So the equipment is required regardless, but obviously the spotlight is coming to the issue because of the increase in participation. But obviously, it's important that any driver, regardless of their gender, is safe in motorsport. And I did see a really interesting conversation actually in the comments earlier about the crashes that occurred yesterday and how the cars didn't go on fire. And yeah, there's a lot of people that look at electric motorsport and are a bit skeptical about it because they're concerned of the fire risk. Especially obviously after we've seen things like Grosjean's crash in Formula One. Obviously that's not electric racing, but people are more concerned of fire safety.
But on that point, almost instantly everybody was like, "Is that the batteries? Is that the batteries that have ignited the big tank of explosible material? Was it the batteries that caused it? What? No, just the fuel tank ripped apart and it didn't go on. No, that fuel. If you just hit fuel at 180 miles an hour, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to stay a liquid. It's absolutely fine."
Yeah, definitely. So I think attention to potentially, if we do move into electric racing, perhaps there will be, or the risk of certain types of injury or accidents will increase or decrease with that change of the power system, if you like. So maybe there's more research that needs to be done into the protective gear that drivers are wearing to protect them from the most likely or most deadly incidents.
Yeah, I tried to look at going racing in 2019. I'd raced at a certain race. It will remain nameless because I don't want to put people under the cosh. But I went racing with certain people in 2015, and in the wet, we were the fastest thing there in a Tesla. We were the fastest thing by an absolute country mile. And nobody expected us to be able to do that. I can remember hearing the commentator over the tannoy because my car was silent. So I was sat on the grid while they were talking about the Tesla and about, oh, Charlie's here with an electric car. Like, oh, let's see what it. Oh, that's going really fast, and it's just set the fastest first bit of time. If I give you what that is, lots of people can guess what it is. And then in 2019, I wrote in and they were like, yeah, you need 20,000, you need to provide us with 20,000 litres of water in case your car goes on fire. And I was like, but we're right next to a big body of water. Like if I go on fire, I can just sort of drive in there, or we can pump water, it will be fine. Like, and also, you're thinking of cars that go on fire that go kaboom. Electric cars don't go kaboom. They kind of go. They get a bit hot and then they stay hot for like 15 hours. And it is really interesting to see. I know that Chelsea Walsh, the hill climb venue, has just announced that they are going to move quite aggressively to allowing electric vehicles to turn up. They've got a whole load of new safety equipment. I think Senna's asking another question again about having Nomex fire suits again. I think as long as I feel much more comfortable, even going karting, it almost puts me. I know it's wrong to be getting into a Nomex suit when I go karting, but it always makes me feel more comfortable. Like it's got a definite smell, doesn't it, Emily? And it's got a definite way it scratches your skin or your hands as you put it on, and you're like, oh, I'm going racing now. But the final is just about to begin. All the drivers are in the cars. Andretti United, Rosberg Racing, and X44. Heather, who are you backing?
I really don't know. I'm afraid I don't know at this point. Yeah, it's kind of
Sticking with Katie, Emily?
Yeah, I think I would stick with Katie as well.
Good. That's 2 for Katie and Hanson.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going Johan and Molly. They're in the middle though, so that's Loeb has moved onto the outside. So Loeb has moved. Loeb and Christina Gutierrez have moved onto the outside where Johansson got that where Kristoffersson got that amazing start in the semi-final.
It'll be interesting to see if the ruts that were formed, obviously, from previous starts this morning will affect that at all. Yeah.
That's what Kristoffersson did. Everybody else sat in the ruts. He sat just off to the side. You see it in rallying all the time. They turn up to the start and they look like they're starting on like half the car off where the circuit goes. And you're like, or the stage goes. And you're like, why? But here we go. I think we're just about to start now. So I'm going to pop everybody on mute. But if there are any questions, please let us know. For those of you that are maybe still watching, we might be like 30 seconds behind everybody else. So Heather, Emily, that thing that happened on the line was incredible. No, okay, let's just not say anything until everybody is aware that it's finished. But thank you everybody so much for joining. I think there was some problems for some people there and not for others. I think we can really see the future of motorsport in this. I think, Emily, Heather, is there anything you want to say before we go away? Emily, I think we're going to plug your Facebook so that everybody can understand where they can go and learn some more about what you're up to. Same with Heather, if you want to let us know whether we can get information for you to understand more as well. And then finally, we'll round off with our Extreme E shop competition. You can get something from the Extreme E shop by tagging us in a photo of your food this evening, or a photo of you watching the Extreme E. Emily, what do you want to plug? If people want to learn more about what's going on in the world of Emily Glanvill, where should they go?
Thank you. Yeah, just check out my Facebook page, Emily Glanvill Racing. Exciting announcement coming up in not too long. Yeah, what will the plans be for this year? But yeah, I've got something in the pipeline, so very much looking forward to that. So definitely check out my page. You'll see updates and things on there, and hopefully a little bit more content on sustainability, Extreme E, Formula E, and these sorts of things in the future as well.
Amazing, amazing. And Heather, I'm just going to turn you up in case you've still got the quote on in the background.
Come over and join us at Scottish EV Drivers. We've got a page and a club as well. If you're thinking about switching to EV, you can come and join us as well. We've got some good, helpful people on the club that will be able to talk you into the various sort of pros and cons and things. We're also on Twitter, so at Scott EV Drivers. Follow us on there. Also work for Energy Saving Trust in Scotland, so if anybody's interested in finding out anything to do with electric vehicles, we've got grants and loans in Scotland. You can pop over to Energy Saving Trust webpage as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Heather. The same here. Like, you probably joined us through jumping on Eventbrite. If you want to jump on there, you can see a whole load of workshops that will be running as of the end of this week to be able to help you get up to speed with electric cars and understand more. I know, Emily, you've sat in secretly on a few to test my knowledge rather than anything else. But absolutely, you're more than welcome to jump on in there. And finally, that competition, if you tag us on Twitter at Octopus EV or at Octopus_EV for Instagram, tag us. We'll make a decision this week and we'll get in touch about how we're going to get you a little bit of a present for coming to our event today. Thank you ever so much, everybody. And we'll see you again soon. Go and enjoy the rest of the race and the interviews with the winners, who, again, because of our delay, I am not going to let you know who it is. See you later, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.